Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians believe in a country where everyone can speak freely, worship freely, and live without fear. I believe that all of the honourable members of this House agree that no one should face threats because of their race, their faith, or who they love. Yet today, Canadians are confronting an alarming reality. The police tell us that hate crimes have risen sharply since the Liberals came to power, up 258% nationwide since 2015. Within that increase, anti-Semitic hate crimes have jumped 416%, and hate crimes against South Asians are up 377%. Last year alone, police reported a staggering 4,882 hate crimes across Canada, and the number of police-reported hate crimes have increased for 6 years in a row. These numbers are real, and they're deeply troubling, and I agree with the Minister that this government must act. But we must separate the goal from the method. Legislating against hate is welcome if it minimally impairs free speech and actually makes our communities safer. But legislation without enforcement is like a lock without a key. It has potential to be useful, but it's far from effective. Now, I share the Minister's concern for both the deterioration of civil discourse in our society and for the victims of hate-motivated crime. The Criminal Code already makes it illegal to utter threats, to incite violence, or to harass someone because of who they are. It contains offenses related to mischief, to blocking infrastructure, and property damage. These provisions are clear, court-tested, and strong. The problem is that police are too often instructed to just keep the peace instead of enforce the law. And when hate crimes are poorly enforced, victims and witnesses often feel like reporting these incidents is futile. If authorities fail to investigate thoroughly, prosecute offenders, or take clear action, people lose faith in the system. This lack of accountability leaves victims feeling isolated, unsafe, and skeptical that their experiences will be taken seriously. Over time, communities become less willing to come forward, allowing bias-motivated behavior to persist unchecked. Weak enforcement, therefore, Mr. Speaker, not only undermines justice for individual victims, but also erodes public confidence in the rule of law. When offenders avoid meaningful consequences, they are emboldened to push boundaries, to disrupt the peace, and to exploit loopholes. And that is what I fear will happen with this legislation, Mr. Speaker. For example, this legislation refers to places of worship, but makes no mention of the predominantly ethnic neighborhoods, hospitals, and other settings, which have also been settings for protests that hold significant risk of leading to violence, with hateful things being said. There is significant risk under this bill that protesting mobs will simply move back into those residential neighborhoods, where they invite escalation and confrontation and instill real fear in families, seniors, and children. Our justice system remains a revolving door, Mr. Speaker, thanks to Bills C-75 and C-5. Charges are dropped, pled down, trials are delayed, and sentences are inconsistent. This bill does nothing to change that. And while this government keeps promising that bail reform and sentencing is coming, we have yet to see it in this House, Mr. Speaker. People deserve to feel safe in their homes, and they will not without enforcement of the laws currently on the books. New offenses are only meaningful if they are clear, enforceable, and consistently applied. This bill needs work to pass that test, Mr. Speaker. While the government claims that the definition of hatred in this legislation simply codifies the language from case law, in fact, the definition as articulated sets a materially lower standard. Hatred is defined in this bill as, quote, the emotion that involves detestation or vilification and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. Wow, that is a confusing mouthful. The minister himself has admitted that the application of this law will be fact-dependent. That means that both law enforcement and ordinary Canadians will have to do some guessing in the moment as to what might be interpreted as a crime. Detestation and vilification is a crime, but disdain and dislike, well, that's free speech. One thing I think all of us in this House know is that one person's disdain is another person's detestation, and one person's dislike certainly feels like vilification to others. In the case law, the standard was higher, requiring the emotion of hatred to be intense and extreme in nature, the extreme manifestation of the sentiment of hate, and be far beyond dislike, disdain, and simple offensiveness. I fear that this bill, as drafted, will become more fodder for accusations on social media, vexatious complaints to police, and aggression between groups. History warns us that where lowering the standard for hate speech can lead. Laws meant to stop hatred have been turned against political dissenters and minority voices. We should not give the state broader powers to police thought or symbolism without first trying to make our existing tools against hatred more effective. Like all honorable members of this House, I reject hate in all of its forms. Every Canadian deserves to feel safe at home, in their place of worship, and on the street. But safety will not come solely from criminalizing symbols or speech. Safety comes from making sure that when someone assaults another person, threatens a synagogue, or vandalizes a mosque, that the police investigate, make arrests, and that the court holds a fair trial and enforces the sentence. This bill removes the Attorney General's oversight before a hate propaganda charge proceeds. That step has proven an important safeguard against politicization and misuse, especially in the case of private prosecutions. Eliminating it without another way to prevent vexatious prosecutions leaves the door wide open to the weaponization of this bill. Right now, Mr. Speaker, our biggest problem, is that enforcement is not consistent. Bail is virtually automatic, and charges are often dropped. Serious charges are pled down. That is where Parliament's attention should be, on stronger enforcement, on swifter prosecutions, and on support for victims. Unamended, this bill risks punishing the unpopular, while the truly dangerous slip through. And so, while I agree wholeheartedly that rising hate crimes demands action, this bill feels more like a Liberal press release than it does like real protection. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives believe in limited government, in the rule of law, and in freedom of expression, even for speech we find offensive. We believe that what is illegal must be clear and tied to real harm, not to subjective feelings of detestation or vilification, however painful they may be to hear. The right response to hateful ideas is not more censorship. It is more debate, more truth, and more courage from citizens willing to challenge hate in the open. So I say to this government, if you want to protect Canadians, start by enforcing the strong laws we already have. Make sure threats, assault, and property crime motivated by hate are investigated and prosecuted to the full extent of the criminal code. Give police the resources they need. Support victims, but do not lightly hand the state new powers to decide which ideas may be expressed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question and commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State combating crime.
Thank you. The honourable member knows, as well as the honourable member from York Centre, that I have a great deal of respect for both of them. I have been to Bathurst and Shepherd, as you well know, and I've seen those individuals waving the Hezbollah flags intentionally to intimidate the members of your Jewish community and my Jewish community who happen to go to those rallies as well. I know for a fact, Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Women Against Anti-Semitism support some of the measures in this bill. The Toronto Police Service have told me they support some of the measures in this bill. The honourable member talks about enforcement. Enforcement's a provincial issue, not a federal issue. So does the honourable member agree that for the federal government to combat hate, that this legislation actually does go a long way with a lot of these stakeholder groups?
The member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really want to thank the honourable member for everything that he has done to support his community and to support our communities. He has really shown care, and I am personally grateful for that. When it comes down to whether or not we need new laws, we are only going to find that out when we make a sincere effort to enforce the ones we already have. And yes, that will involve working with our provincial counterparts. And I think that there is a lot of work to do in terms of tone and signal and tone from this federal government in that. But if this government truly wants to protect Canadians, it's going to need to focus on resources for police, on support for victims, and on consistent application of the criminal code. And there is a lot that the federal government can do to be able to support our law enforcement. We need to make sure that when someone assaults another person, threatens a synagogue, or vandalizes a mosque.
Question and commentaire.
Questions and comments, Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, am I correct in understanding that my Conservative colleagues are concerned about freedom of expression and the right to demonstrate or protest and how that could be affected by this bill? The new provision, which would make it an offence to block or impede access to places of worship or cultural places, that is of concern to us. We'll discuss it in committee, of course, but this provision I've mentioned, do Conservatives feel that it might impact the right to peaceful protest?
I want to thank the honourable member for his question. I think it's a good one. I think part of the challenge with this legislation is that it leads to legislative whack-a-mole. When you start talking about different locations, I fear that it really will drive people back into residential neighbourhoods, and then we will be constantly trying to chase these protests around into different locations. We have had these protests in so many different locations, and I think that we need to focus on the activities as opposed to the places.
Questions, comments. The Member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
Thank you. I thank my colleague for that excellent speech. As a lawyer and a former adjudicator, I'd like to hear her opinion in terms of the differing standards of proof. We have the extreme vilification versus the lower standard in Bill C-9. Knowing that our courts are overburdened with cases right now, with Jordan delays being commonplace across Canada, how do you feel this confusing threshold, will that increase the amount of litigation in our criminal courts?
Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
I want to thank the honourable member for his question because I think it's a really important point. One of the real struggles particularly in the last couple of years, has been that people who are experiencing extreme examples of hatred and violence in their communities on the streets. We've had a lot of instances where people stand on one side of the street and yell at people on the other side of the street with law enforcement in between. One of the real challenges in all of this is that public prosecutions are very hard to lay, and it's very difficult in the moment to find witnesses and to be able to ascertain what actually happened, especially with people shrieking. And there's often allegations on both sides, lots of cell phone tape, and I think it's going to be chaos.